Tricia Perry for Vision of the Valley. Today we're in Poland Township and we're talking about one of Poland's most recognizable landmarks, the Little Red Schoolhouse. Joining me and talking about this is Dave Smith, and he's a local historian who knows a lot about this area, the schoolhouse, history of Poland. But what I want to know is, why is it here? Because to people who live here now today, this looks like four corners of almost nothing except for this schoolhouse. Why is it here?
Good question, Tricia. Actually, this is the geographic center of Poland Township.
So
most townships,
this is actually the middle.
The middle. This intersection of Struthers Road and Route 224 would be probably the exact middle of the township. And there was a settlement here back in the early days, just as there was in the village. Many townships, the center of the township was the community people settled in. Poland, we had Yellow Creek, so a lot of people settled in that area. We know about Turhan Kirtland and Jonathan Fowler. But at the center of Poland, the township area, remember, a township is 5 miles each way, north and south, east and west. So 2.5 miles from here, if you go out to the east, you would be in Pennsylvania. 2.5 miles to the west would take you into Boardman Township through the village of Poland. 2.5 miles to the north of here would take you to Struthers and Coyceville. Of course, Struthers at one time was part of the township, but they became incorporated since then. And then 2.5 miles to the south would take you to Springfield Township.
Right. So, as I recall, in the Western Reserve, towns that were placed at crossroads usually had important parts of the town on each corner.
Sure.
You can think about Canfield and how it has a courthouse and a church and different things around each corner. But here that never really happened, right? Just the school happened.
Well, we have some other buildings here. There are some records that show across the street in what would be the southeast corner, there was a church, a Presbyterian church actually. And eventually, over the years, it was physically moved, taken apart and moved to Struthers and became Struthers Presbyterian Church. On the southwest corner, they tell me there was a tavern, the McGill Tavern at one day. You know, they always had a tavern in the communities back in those days. And then on the northwest corner was a residence, a family by the name of Lowry. The gentleman had a meat market. It was also the local post office. And we know that the residents of the whole township, including the village, would come out here to vote, probably in the building behind us here at the Little Red Schoolhouse, because it was here since 1858.
So they built it in 1858. They must have thought it was important to have a school, and they made it brick, which is kind of unusual for an old schoolhouse, right?
Many of the old schoolhouses were frame. Brick was rather unusual, and maybe because of that it has lasted longer. And actually this was a two-room schoolhouse rather than just one also, as they found out when they started doing the renovations. The property itself here belonged to a family named Adair, A-D-A-R. And the people in the area went together to the township at that time and bought the property for $80, believe it or not.
Wow.
It was 1.5 acres in those days. And the land was pretty much like it is now, but there was no schoolhouse then.
Right.
There was an earlier schoolhouse across the street that had deteriorated, so they did need to build a new one.
So how many children at a time do you think went to school here?
I would guess at a two-room school, and it depended on the season. In the winter, there were always more students, because in the spring and fall, some of the young men especially were needed on the farms. But it could probably hold 30 to 50 students at one time. And of course, there was no bus transportation back in those days. The parents were responsible for getting there, and students did a lot more walking in those days than they do now.
And really it was one of several schoolhouses all around the township, right?
Yes, our records show, and we have an actual map that will point out, there were 6 schools similar to this. Many of them were frame rather than brick, but they were spread throughout Poland Township. And then of course we had the schools in the village in addition to that.
So how long did that last before this, maybe, did it ever become part of Poland's school system or not?
Eventually it did. In 1915, however, the county school systems were formed in Ohio. So there was really no longer a need for the one-room schools or two-room schools as we have here. So the county school system began to build their own buildings throughout the township, and this building was not used anymore as an actual school starting in 1915.
Okay, so you mentioned that it was a brick building, and maybe that's why it was so well preserved over the years. But after it was a school, what happened to the building then? What did it do after that?
Yes, as I mentioned, in 1915 it stopped being used as a school. It was used for various purposes over the years. For a while it was a church. We have some folks who dropped in one day at one of our open houses that they said they were actually married in this building when it was serving as a church.
It would be a great place for weddings
Exactly,
still, I
it was.
think.
And the township owned it for a while. They used it for storage and sometimes for offices, but many of those years it was just unoccupied and not used for much of anything.
And it became part of the Historical Society, and I see that there's a marker as well.
Yes.
In what year?
In 1979, members of the community formed the Poland Historical Society, and they determined that they wanted to save this building because the school district owned it. They'd had a couple offers to sell it, but did not accept those offers. But it was in bad shape at that time. So the members of the Historical Society got together. They went to several school board meetings, met with the officials in the school board, and came up with a plan whereby the Historical Society would lease the building. They ended up with a 99-year lease for $1 a year, with the conditions that they would maintain and preserve the building and also promote the history of Poland, which we've tried to continue to do.
And you're still doing it. So did you have to do much renovation work to any of the building on the outside? Any kind of restoration?
Well, actually, I was not involved at that time with it, so I came along later. But in reading the history of the schoolhouse, we see, yes, it was in bad shape. There was a lot of need for repairs on the outside and the inside of the building. And it took a lot of volunteers, a lot of donated time, a lot of donations financially. Some of the government agencies got involved. They got a grant from Mahoning County to help financially with it. But it was a big project and took a lot of time to actually get it done.
This is nice that it's been on the National Register too.
Yes, National Register. There aren't very many places in the township that are on the National Register.
Right.
And because of that, we have to try to keep it in its original condition as much as possible too.
Even inside. So let's go inside. So everything about this looks like an old one-room schoolhouse, except the fact that there are no desks, and it's not being used as such right now.
Not as a schoolhouse.
But a lot of this is probably the way it was when it was a schoolhouse.
Oh, the floors, the walls are pretty much the same as they were. When they plastered these walls, they tried to find the same mix formula that had been used back in those days. That plaster is on brick, of course, so we have brick walls. That's why there's no holes or picture nails pounded in the walls, because it would go into the brick.
Right.
The floors were replaced entirely. We have pictures of that being done.
Now, when you said it was really a two-room schoolhouse, where was the other room?
I'm not sure, but Nick Jeswald, who was a former trustee and very much involved in the renovation, discovered somehow the way this room was built that it had to be originally divided into two rooms.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. Maybe the little kids in one room and the older kids in another room.
So there wasn't, and they had two teachers then.
Yeah.
Back in those days.
And they probably, you know, that's made it a better school if they had two teachers instead of one.
It depends on how many students you have, I guess, and how you want to separate them.
So now that the Historical Society owns it, you have a great collection that you've amassed, not just about Poland schools, but about a lot of things in Poland, and even Struthers and the surrounding area, right?
Yes, we're now also a museum as well as a schoolhouse. So we have a lot of things that have been donated over the years, photographs. Unfortunately, not all the photographs have the people's names on them, which we'd like to know.
That's helpful, yeah.
We have this series of old Poland vintage postcards that we had reproduced. We actually have for sale.
And then look, here's a picture of what we're in right now, right? Is this it?
That's the same building, but that's how it looked back in 1904. That's how the students dressed back in those days.
Let me ask you, you know, you drive around the area and you see a lot of buildings like this. I know that there are some around here that are used as houses now. You can sort of tell by the way they're built and the design that it was a schoolhouse slash maybe church. How lucky are we to have this preserved like this as a schoolhouse?
We're very lucky, very fortunate, and we owe a lot of gratitude to the people who got involved to make this happen. If people hadn't taken an interest, this would have been torn down or deteriorated and not be here today.
It probably helped that the center of Poland moved down the way a little bit, right? Because if this was in demand here and people were wanting to build on it, it might have been a little harder.
We might have had a gas station or a fast food restaurant here instead. That's exactly right.
Yeah, Poland's always been a little unusual that way, where they moved their center down the way.
We move things, yes.
It wasn't quite a square down there, but it works for us, right?
Exactly.
So do people give you these pictures, or how do you find all of this?
Yes, they're donated. Sometimes maybe an older person passes away and the heirs don't know what to do with the material, so they pass it on to us. I've only been involved for 4 years or so, but even over that amount of time, people send things from far away. We got a donation from the state of Washington. A fellow moved to Florida. Before he moved, he donated several items, including some nice books and histories to us. So it's people donating things. And then, of course, you need people to organize and decide where to put everything. And that's a constant battle. We're always trying to get things organized and in its right place.
Right. I'm looking at this. Is this supposed to be this schoolhouse?
That's a depiction of this schoolhouse. Yes, that was painted and shows what the school might have been like.
And he
back
was
in the 1860s.
The man who did it was born in 1908?
Myron Miller, yeah.
Wow. People must have had strong feelings about this place then.
Definitely. They were attached to it and wanted to preserve it, so they did paintings such as this and just the work to keep this building as neat as it is.
So show me something that you love talking about here.
Well, we have so many different things. Most of this section is about the early Poland schools, and pardon us, but we're still getting organized. But
okay.
We have pictures of some of the earlier students. We have scrapbooks. We have one book that talks about nothing but the sports in Poland. Talks about polo being a big sport at one time.
Oh my gosh.
The early football games. The picture down here shows the early football team in 1902. I'm pretty sure that was 6-man football at that time.
Wow, look
and
at
I
them.
see that we beat Canfield 11-0. I'm not sure how you score 11 points, but we did it back in those days.
Some odd thing
We have
happened.
programs from dances, proms, the football banquet.
Look, the 5th football banquet. Can you imagine when it was only the 5th one in Poland?
1948 back then. Yes.
Now it's like banquet upon banquet, every single age group. And then this is wonderful, Poland Union School. My daughter went there.
A little bit earlier.
Yeah. And then Mrs. McDonald, who we know from
I think
church.
she was a member of the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
This is a little album book we put together when we did our program on the 19th century homes. We do a PowerPoint presentation. And this shows many of the homes as they are now that were built before 1900.
That one looks familiar.
That's a familiar house. That's my house.
That's your house. I know. I think people who live in old houses sort of have a love of history that expands out through the walls into other structures. And then you have, of course, the Pioneers.
We've been fortunate to receive donations of many of the high school yearbooks, the Pioneer. We don't have every year, but we have a lot of them. This one goes back to 1930. That's the earliest edition.
Wow.
38, 42, 58, and we have many more too in our case.
We had a few of these. I remember these, the Fireman's Directory.
Those are the Poland Fireman Directories. Yeah, people really miss those because the neat thing was at the back of the directory, you could go by the streets and find out who your neighbors were, who all lived on streets. I used this recently. A lady from Arizona was trying to track down who lived in a home that she remembered in Poland. And by looking at the different years, we were able to authenticate who the owners were over the years.
Poland's role in the Civil War. I bet this gets a lot of people interested.
Yes, we did a presentation on that also. We know that the Company E of the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry was formed mostly of young men from Poland, including future President William McKinley. So we've documented a lot of that information. We found out where they're buried. McKinley kept a diary of his early days in the war, so we're able to follow him down through West Virginia, Harnifex Ferry, and other places that he spent. So that was an interesting program. And of course, we're still celebrating the 150th anniversary, commemorating maybe is a better term, of the Civil War.
So I'm sure people come in here looking, especially Civil War buffs who want to know more.
Yep, definitely. We have several other Civil War books on hand, but this one pertains mostly to Poland's role.
So this looks familiar to me. When I was a kid, there was a section of the Vindicator that we called the Brown section or the rotogravure section. I think I'm saying that correctly.
I think you have it right.
Is that what this is all? It's about Poland.
Mostly it's items from the rotogravure, and this happens to be about the older homes in Poland. exteriors and interiors.
Oh, wow.
And most of these homes are still in existence.
In 1939 they did this. And this section lasted into the 80s, I think, because I remember some of my friends being in pictures in it. And that
was always something people look forward to on Sundays as part of the newspaper.
Right.
But unfortunately, no longer.
I know they stopped doing it, but it was it's a great section.
So we try to preserve articles. Rather than folding newspaper articles, it's best to put them in a book this large.
Right.
To maintain them so you don't get the creases. And we have ones that have been donated where the newspapers are falling apart because they have been folded.
And what year was this, 72? When they moved St. James Meeting House to?
Yes, to the Boardman Park area.
I vaguely remember going to the mall when I was a kid and it being, or when they were building the mall and it was on that corner where the mall is.
That's where it was, right at the intersection.
Yeah, Southern
Boardman Center, actually, that would have been.
Right, and I did miss this moving down the street thing though. That was pretty cool. I did not see that happen. Here's another one, limestone.
This is the limestone quarry, which was out in the eastern part of the township, now part of Carbon Limestone landfill.
Yeah.
And then here's some early sports pictures. Here's some kids on a bus tour of Poland and Mahoning County. This is one where they're stopping at the McKinley House, or just across the street in downtown Poland.
Yeah.
One from the mill, Lanterman's Mill.
On the bridge. And here they did this again in 45, more buildings.
So yes, they couldn't get all the older buildings in one edition, so they did several different takes of them.
And this is still here, right? It doesn't. Does it still have the tower? It doesn't have the tower, does it?
I don't believe it does.
This is the one that's on 170, right?
Bishop Road, yes, I believe.
So you'll have a lot of artifacts here, a lot of things that must be preserved carefully, and you've done that with this diploma?
Yes, this was another great donation that we received just in this past year. This is a diploma for Nellie Kelty, who graduated from Poland Seminary High School in 1869.
Wow.
So she was a sister of another Kelty woman who married a guy by the name of Daniel May. And Daniel May left a diary, and a book was actually published about him, talking about him being a good friend of the McKinleys. He was part of the McKinley family. His second wife was Mary McKinley, and then Kelty was his third wife.
And so I see you put it in a book where you can't touch it with your hand, which is good. Did you have to learn how to take care of these artifacts and do it properly so that things weren't damaged or lost?
We're still learning, but yes, we try to do that. We have these boxes to keep things in, and acid-free sheets that you store them in so that they don't deteriorate as they would if you keep them in.
Okay. Yeah, this is really nice. I mean, so just to have this is amazing that it was saved all these years. Is that the ribbon that was around it?
Yes, there was a ribbon with it. A member of the Kelty family passed it on to a neighbor who lived in Poland, and that neighbor had it for years and finally decided I should give this to the Historical Society, so we were quite happy to get it. And then other old documents about that size go into this smaller book as compared to the other one that we looked at a little bit ago.
Right. Yeah, it's really a big job keeping track of the history of an entire town.
And it takes volunteers. Now, the present society, we have maybe 2 or 3 members who were involved many years ago, so it's been very helpful to have them working with us. But a lot of us are, within the last 4 years or so, we've become active. So we're learning a lot as we go along. But I have to say, we do have an active group that has sort of revived the organization. We put on a program once a month now, except for the summer, that wasn't being done before. So in the evenings on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, we attract 20 to 30 people out here on various topics. We talked about Poland and the Civil War. We did a program on the Poland Country Club. We've done them on various parts of Poland history over the years and individuals who stand out.
Do you get the school kids involved too?
That's a good question, yes. We have a program where the students are able to visit during a school day. They can spend a whole school day here if they want, and some of them even try to dress as the students may have dressed back in those days. They bring a lunch, they go outside, weather permitting, and play things like stickball as they did back in the old days. We used to be able to have them ring the school bell here, but we decided we better stop doing that. So the rope's still there, but we put it up high enough that the kids can't do it anymore. But yes, we've worked with several of the elementary buildings in Poland. Another thing we did that was kind of neat that I got involved in last May was a walk through downtown Poland. I actually led third graders from North Elementary through the village of Poland and talked about the old buildings and the old stone tavern and up to the graveyard. They really enjoyed it.
I can imagine. And some of us hear these things, even myself, I've lived here almost all my life. I do not ever remember hearing about a Poland country club until today when you said that. So, you know, you're amazed at what you can find here. You think you know everything, and then you look through a book and you see something and learn something you didn't know.
Right. The country club, by the way, came about because of the streetcar or trolley that was built from Youngstown to Poland around 1913. So in the area on Sheridan Road, about where the Paul C. Bunn School is now, was a golf course, a 9-hole golf course. At first, it was really the place to be. People from Youngstown would come out, and of course the men would play golf there. A lot of social functions were held there. Unfortunately, over the years, it became more or less a gambling den and was raided a few times.
Well, we can't have that.
Eventually it was closed. It actually wasn't in Poland Township. It was a little bit north there, so we don't take blame for that. But we have a nice picture that we'll show you here that shows what the country club was like in its heyday.
It looks kind of similar, like a mini Youngstown Country Club or something.
Exactly. It was a very nice place.
Okay, along with all the artifacts, you also have examples of what children were probably reading and learning at the time, back in the 1800s. One of those, of course, we all know about the McGuffey reader.
And of course, McGuffey was from Mahoning County,
right,
too.
Right. And then White Saddle was a story I knew as a child. That's a Poland woman that wrote about that, right?
Yes, Ethel Hall Miller was her name. And they actually lived in the village of Poland where the bakery, Harriet Sprinkles, is right now. And the ponies actually were in her yard, and people would come and ride White Saddle. But then she wrote this children's story, and her husband helped her publish it. And we've been told, at least, that it was required reading for third graders for many years, similar to the Black Beauty story.
I can believe that because my grandmother had a copy of it. She was born in 1914.
Oh,
and so I
that
think,
would fit right in.
Yeah, I think she must have had it for a reason. It was a childhood book of hers, so
sure.
It's quite possible she had to read it for school. But yeah, it's a great story, and a lot of children, at least up through my years, knew about it. So I wonder if they still are talking about White Saddle in schools today.
Actually, when I did the program at Poland North Elementary with the third graders, the teachers read that story to them before they came out here to visit or to walk through town. Here's a picture of the grave of White Saddle.
Aww.
This family built their own home, a log cabin on Klingen Road, right near their recycling center.
Yes, I know where that is.
White Saddle is buried in the front yard there.
Very nice. And there's the weekly reader and several probably McGuffies.
Right, and we've been receiving many books from the old days, math books and other kinds of books that people have. In fact, we get so many, it's hard to know which to keep and which to store in the basement.
We talked about the books that children were learning from, but you also have other collections here, such as diaries. Tell me about your diaries here in Poland.
Well, we were very fortunate to find, these were stored away for a while. A couple of summers ago, I came across them. Henry Turhand Kirtland was Turhand Kirtland's second son. He lived at 82 Poland Manor near the Presbyterian Church. Well, we were very fortunate. A couple years ago, we came across these, and again, things that were donated that we had not uncovered. But a gentleman by the name of Henry Turhand Kirtland, who was the second son of one of the founders of Poland, Turhand Kirtland, kept an annual diary from 1843 to about 1871, I believe. He died just a couple years after that. So Henry would write in this diary, in a little space for each day, usually what the weather was like that day, and then some significant events that would happen during that time. He notes in here when his father died, when his mother died. He had a son, unfortunately, that died. When they butchered hogs, when they would have a storm, when the locust would come. But as you can see, it's very small print, so I actually had to use a magnifying glass to see what was there.
Besides his events of his own life, it was mostly farming, probably.
A lot of farming, because he was big into farming, for sure. Some about his family. What we were able to do then was, with the magnifying glass's help, take some excerpts. I didn't write every day, of course, but We made a little booklet called Day by Day, Life and Times of Henry Turhan
Very
Kirtland.
nice.
So what we did is summarize each year so that you can see major events or interesting events that happened over the year.
Thieves were among Palmer's sheep last night.
Yeah.
Ooh, very exciting. Saw men fishing in the mill pond, less exciting.
Exactly.
Road to Fink Schoolhouse, there you go. Emma Hine borrowed pictures and stereoscope.
Emma Hine would have lived across the street from the village green there.
Yeah, bought fruit trees, went to torchlight procession and illumination. What was that, I wonder?
Well, they had, sometimes during campaign years, they would have torchlight parades.
Oh, okay.
And that may have been part of that. But we managed to save some excerpts from each year up to 1871. An interesting thing, Henry had a son, George. We found out in doing research later, it wasn't in the diary, he was paralyzed. And Henry would talk in his diary about, we took George into the carriage, or even on Saturday they gave George a bath. And in 1853 they took George to Granville, Ohio. There was a facility there called the Granville Institute of Hydrotherapy. And apparently it was to help him get cured if possible. I don't think it took, I know it didn't. The story is that he became paralyzed by diving into the creek. I assume maybe he hit his head in the creek and
broke his
got
back.
paralyzed. Something happened that he broke his back. So that was a sad story. He died just a couple years before Henry himself did.
Oh, okay.
So that was an interesting find, and we have them stored away in a
These
box
are all
where
of
they'll
his?
be preserved. That's from
All of his?
43 to 71.
All from
yeah.
the same guy. Okay.
Same man.
Wow, that's really wonderful.
Now, Turhan Kirtland himself kept a diary, and that's even online. We've been able to find copies of the days that he came here, looking over Poland for the Connecticut Western Reserve Land Company, and what the conditions were like, which were quite difficult in those days.
I bet. So one thing I was looking for more to the middle of the building when we came in was a stove that would have heated the building, or maybe on the side, and I'm seeing that it's way back here in the corner.
It is. Of course, this is not an actual working stove right now. It's set up to resemble what it might have looked like back in those days. But the students probably would be very happy to be the ones chosen to go out and get firewood for the day or to clean the ashes out. That was an honor back in those days, believe it or not.
It wasn't probably in this corner, was it?
Probably not. It may have been in the center.
I would think in the center or in that wall right there, maybe.
Possibly, yes.
But yeah, that's amazing that all of these children were kept warm during school hours with this little black stove.
Probably not as warm as they are today, but it was comfortable enough.
And I know we're not allowed to ring the bell up there, but this one's okay?
You can ring that bell, yes. That's how the students would be called in for the start of the day and for recess being over, and get down and get back to work.
Was this one here? Is this original?
No, that's from another school, again, that was donated by someone else. But from Poland Township.
I'm annoying everyone now. It was another school in Poland Township.
Yes, the Fink or Dobbins School it was called, kind of down where the high school is now. There was a one-room schoolhouse in that area.
So was Fink a name?
That was a family name.
Family.
Yeah, a lot of the schools were named after the people who owned the property where the school was built. Dobbins was also a name of people who lived along Dobbins Road, of course.
Right.
So
I never heard, again, I went to Dobbins Elementary, but never heard the name Fink.
Oh, that's
ever before.
That's another name too.
Yeah, the things you learn here at the Little Red Schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Very good.
This is a lot of our McKinley collection.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, William McKinley, 25th President of the United States. We have photos of his home. We have photos of William himself. We have a campaign badge that was used when he was running for Congress.
Oh, wonderful. And these keys, what were those two, do you think?
We don't know,
They
but
just
they're
look good
old, so we keep them.
Yes, they look like they are very old.
We really don't know. They're just old keys.
So.
It's a presidential plate that shows all of the presidents, including William McKinley. This lady here donated a lot of things. Mrs. Bishop. They lived in the Bishop house.
Sure.
And George Bishop was her husband. Isabel. A lot of the things we've uncovered, we found were donated by her or her children when she passed on.
So I see this rope hanging from the ceiling.
Yes.
That's one thing that has caught my eye, and I'm assuming that that's attached to the school bell, right?
That does reach up to the bell in the bell tower atop the building.
Which is still there?
It's back there, let's say. The original bell came down over the years, and we found in reading the history of the renovation that a lady in the neighborhood stored the bell. When the building was restored, she offered the bell up again to be used on the schoolhouse. So they had to construct a new bell tower up there and lift the bell up into the tower. And it can actually be run as it was in the old days.
But you don't really let people do that anymore?
We kind of discourage it these days.
Because it might damage it, or it's too old?
And also the rope has to hang down far enough and people run into it when they're walking by, but it can be run.
I know a few school children that probably love doing that.
They would love to do it.
Yeah.
We have let some over the years do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good. So no attic up there, just the tower.
No, just the bell tower.
So as we cross through this doorway right here, this part here is rather new, at least in the last 30 years almost, right?
Yes, about 27 years exactly. The schoolhouse renovation was completed in 1987. They had a dedication ceremony with a lot of dignitaries and a lot of people dressed up in costumes of the day. But it was finished in 1987. But they obviously decided there wasn't enough room there to have the facilities that we needed. So by 1991, 4 years later, this addition was dedicated, and it includes a nice kitchen.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk in there.
Sure.
So this is a great little kitchen, perfect for a small building that has, sort of semi-large gatherings. This can handle everything here, right?
Exactly. Over the years, we've had functions where we supplied food, and you can see the window that enters into the old schoolhouse here, but we have coffee pots, and we have our annual Christmas dinner here, so the members bring food, but we still need the kitchen for part of that, and a refrigerator, microwave. So some things they didn't have back in the days of the Little Red Schoolhouse.
Sure. But now this had to take a money-raising campaign, right? So
Yes.
how did that all take place?
Again, starting in 1987, when the schoolhouse was finished, the members of the organization did begin a fundraising campaign. A big fundraiser that they used over the years was a Christmas tour of homes. You may remember back in the
Right, I do
early
remember
days.
that.
It was a big event. You had to have a lot of people staffed at the homes to be hosts and hostesses, and homeowners in Poland volunteered to let their homes be shown. And of course there was a fee. That donation went to the Historical Society. They found out, I guess I just heard recently, that they made a lot more money once they started publishing a program booklet and selling ads for the booklet. And eventually they raised enough money, and again we had volunteers and donations for the materials to design this addition to the building, which fits in right with the schoolhouse.
What else is included in the addition?
In addition to the kitchen, we have restrooms for both men and women. We have an office, we call it, where we store some things. We have a printer and a copy machine in there. We have a storage room for cleaning supplies. And then we do have a basement in this part of the building. Now the schoolhouse only has a crawling space, but when we installed heating and air conditioning, as they didn't have in the early days, we did add a basement to this part of the building too. And we use it for storage for materials that we'll use over the years. There was a furnace room attached to the schoolhouse that burned coal, but of course it was taken off because it was no longer necessary once they established central air. Give credit to the people who put in the time and effort over the years. People like Betty Jones, there's a plaque here in the hallway in honor of her because she was really the leading force behind all of this. And one of our members, Pete Sturby, is a township trustee. He was involved over the years. Ed Verostek's a member. Pepper McGarry is a current member. And several over the years. I'm sure I'll leave a lot of people out. But Betty Jones did write a nice history of the renovation and the schoolhouse, which we've been able to use to find this information.
So the lesson for today, Poland's history extends far beyond the walls of the Little Red Schoolhouse. For more about Poland's past and what's coming up in the future, go to their website at polandtownship.com or find them on Facebook at Poland, Ohio Historical Society. For Vision of the Valley, I'm Tricia Perry.